Media by the People presents.
Welcome to the I Love Wine and Dogs podcast, hosted by Heidi Hubner and Timothy Coleman.
With today's special guest, Liz Flynt.
This is a SAG-AFTRA approved micropodcast.
Welcome to the I Love Wine and Dogs podcast, created, produced, and hosted by Heidi Hubner, with engineering and production by Timothy Stonedancer Coleman. This show was created to celebrate good wine, amazing pets, and people from around the world who are doing great things in their local communities.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode of the I Love Wine and Dogs podcast. I'm Timothy Stonedancer Coleman, brother to the Sister Almighty. How you doing, Heidi? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy that we are here today, and I'm so excited for our guest today, Ms. Liz Flynt. But I think you guys might notice Timothy and I are sporting some merch. Got my coffee mug.
Listen, you always got to have something to drink, right? And we're not saying it's alcohol, but we are saying whatever you put in it is going to taste great because it's from I Love Wine and Dogs. And, Heidi, I want to say one quick thing. In a previous episode, you beat me to the punch and you showed some merch that you had ordered. And so I want to just show the folks one quick thing, right? We've got this cute bag. I didn't expect the fabric to be this good, right? Like, this is pretty sturdy. There's 1,000 different uses. You could put pens, pencils, whatever your household things are in here. For those of us who are more on like the engineering back end producer side, I use this for like all my cables, right? Like when I lead a lot of like podcasting classes and whatever in the community, I put all my cables and stuff in this one bag so that I'm not reaching down in my backpack for 100,000 little different individual things. So, head on over to the ilovewineanddogs.com website and click on that merch button. And there's tons of things that are there for you guys to enjoy.
I love that. That's a great idea. I have all of the USB cords for every phone and appliance that you need now. So I'm going to buy one of our bags and put those in there.
I know that's right. I have cords for things that I don't even have items for anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like they outdate pretty quick. So what's been happening for you out there in LA?
We're getting over this heat wave. I'm over it. What about you over there?
Everything over here in New York City has leveled out. All the kids are back in school. So it's nice to be around, doing the education thing and like raising up that next generation of podcasters.
I love it. So I'm going to let you do our introduction, but should we hold up our books first?
Let's do our surprise.
Going into books and books now.
As chairwoman of the Hustler brand, Liz Flynt oversees Flynt Management Group, LLC, managing over 2,500 employees globally. She's responsible for LFP Publishing Group, renowned gaming enterprises such as Hustler Casino and Larry Flynt's Lucky Lady Casino, Larry Flynt's Hustler Club, retail operations including Hustler Hollywood and Lovers Stores, LFP e-commerce, multimedia powerhouses, LFP Broadcasting, operating in 55 plus countries and collaborating with over 500 cable and satellite providers, LFP Video and Sapphire Media. Before joining Hustler, Liz Flynt, formerly Liz Berrios, was a registered nurse at UCLA Hospital's Coronary Care Heart Transplant Unit. She met Larry Flint in 1991, working for him while still at UCLA, and transitioned to Hustler full-time in 1993. Liz married Larry in 1998 and was promoted to associate publisher in 2000.
Here is my friend and my superwoman, Liz Flynt. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Thank you. It's such an honor to be on your show, Timothy, with love. I am just so excited to be on your podcast. Of course, no one ever has to ask me if I love dogs. 2 dogs. I have a standard Schnauzer Blue and a miniature Schnauzer Bailey Flint, and they are my boys.
So that's their love, their dog, their heart dog are the Schnauzers, which is such a great breed. They're so smart and they're so cute, and just we love that. We'll be posting some pictures of them. And then also, before we get into the questions, because we have so many, we got to talk about the wine. So Liz, I think your favorite wine is the Chateau Montrelina Chardonnay.
Yes, it is. It's my favorite. It's from Napa, and it's my favorite, Chardonnay, Chateau Montelena. And I've been drinking this since 2018.
So I went to their website, and oh my gosh, the place is beautiful, the winery. But also, when I was on their website, I saw that they have a tasting room in San Francisco at Union Square, which I thought, how cool. Like, if you maybe weren't able to make it up to the vineyard and visit the winery, that you could still enjoy it if you're up in San Francisco at that tasting room. I love it. You learn something new every day.
Well, you just gave me an idea. On October 2nd, I'm signing at in San Francisco at the Ferry Building. You just gave me an idea.
You'll have to make a visit to them. I love it. So I'm going to let Tim take it away. Well, first of all, I just have to say, I loved this book and I learned so much. It just opened up my eyes and my mind, because I was very young when, Larry was doing all of this, and, had heard of Hustler and heard of some things, but I really didn't understand all that he stood for and what he fought for and what you're continuing to do.
Every time a company makes a milestone, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, there's something to celebrate. Was there a particular moment that made you feel like this book was necessary right now?
Well, the book, Hustler 50 Years of Freedom, took me 2 years to write, and I wasn't by myself. I was propped up by many lawyers, in-house counsel, and editors and archivists, and it took a long time. And let me tell you why. Because we're in the business of publishing, I had to make sure that I owned all the rights, and I did. And then what the inspiration was, we were coming up on our 50th, and I thought, wow, Larry didn't live long enough to write it, so I have 30 years. So I thought, I'm going to write this book for him. Once you start going through the archives and all the materials, you really get to find out a little bit more about this magazine. And through the decades, the styles, the hair, the makeup, wow. It just made me laugh, just because I started to remember the 70s and the 80s. But you know what? Larry was a real pioneer, a real trailblazer, a real visionary kind of guy. And my favorite publisher statement was, one statement he wrote is, anyone could be a playboy, anyone could have a penthouse, but it takes a man to be a hustler. And that, coming out of the gate, Larry had a message, and he was going to get his message out there.
I loved all of the comic strips towards the end of the book.
The cartoons.
That
was one of Larry's favorite, too. He always used to say, if my readers and subscribers don't get the humor, then I can't publish it. Because it's just, and Larry was an equal opportunist, too. And he was very famous for going to the U.S. Supreme Court. And part of that is making parody and satire protected speech. So you could say something, and still you're protected by the First Amendment. And that case was a landmark case, and it is taught in all law schools today. And the thing is that we're all talking about free speech. And Larry used to say, free speech includes hate speech. You can't start slicing and dicing what is covered. The only time you're not covered is when there is harm.
We'll be right back after these messages. ilovewinanddogs.shop, your one-stop shop to support loving pets, good wine, and great people doing awesome things in their communities.
Watch season 1 of I Love Wine and Dogs on Spotify.
Wherever you live, go to your local shelter or work with your local rescue group to bring in your new forever loving baby if you're ready. Remember, you got to make sure you're ready for this commitment, but you can foster, you can volunteer. There are so many other ways that you can give back and help your fellow community in the pet world.
Like, share, and subscribe on Facebook and Instagram at I Love Wine and Dogs.
Welcome back to the show.
So when you were talking about going through all of the archives, is there like a huge building where all of this stuff is and somebody's put everything nicely in protective binders? Like what does that look like where everything is kept?
Well, two parts. At corporate office here in Century City, we have two areas that we call the archives, and that's all the content of Hustler Magazine, with the exception of the magazine, so let me give you a little history about this magazine. Well, Timothy, you might remember, but back in the day when photographers used to take pictures, there were called the chromolins, the slides.
Yes.
And so, and how Larry used to edit was with the loop. And then you would go in the light board and with the special crayon and you would circle and, just make editing. And now we're in this digital age. So in 2000, I think it was 2006 or 7, we went digital. So from that point on, everything is digital here, the magazine. So, but in Torrance at our Hustler warehouse, we have a special room that was designed, and it's set to a certain temperature to preserve all the chromolins. Yes. And they're in special cabinets through the years. So, they start from the beginning in 74 all the way up until we went digital. So it's a temperatured room, and it's under 2 deadbolts, and it's very protected, and lots of cameras on it.
Thank you, because I always wonder those things, right? You say that, but like, what does it really look like? So anyway, okay, Tim, back to you.
I want people to understand not only what you've gone through to collect all of this and put all the right pieces together, but when they buy this book, what do you want people to experience?
So this coffee table book is 50 years of Hustler, and I believe there is something for everybody. There's publisher statements, the best in 5 decades. There are the cartoons, the illustrations, the photo sets. Everybody has the Jackie O issue, the very first cover of Hustler magazine. People always have a favorite. Another iconic cover was Larry got a lot of heat from was the meat grinder. We will not make women into meat. In other words, when Larry's movie came out in 97, Gloria Steinem took a full page out in the New York Times and really wrote why the Academy should not honor Larry in this movie and also be nominated. Milos Forman, the director, was nominated, Woody Harrelson, the screenwriters. But you know what? She has that right. I think that, and she deferred to Larry as someone who depicted women in a negative way by putting them in a meat grinder. And let me tell you, there's a story behind that cover. I asked Larry at the time, I said, why did you do that? What was the inspiration? Why did you do that? And he said, Liz, I was in jail in Butner, North Carolina, when that cover came out. He said, my editor at the time, Bruce David, put that cover out. He asked Larry's wife at the time, Althea, and she signed off on it. But Larry took the heat. He was the publisher and the owner, and he didn't throw anybody under the bus. He took the heat. So that's what you do. You just take it and answer for it.
I like what you're talking about because it is still free speech. And we have the option of deleting it, ignoring it, walking past it. But I think one of the cool things that I hear you saying and that I'm feeling from the book is that Larry was not only out here saying it's freedom of speech as long as you say something that I like,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
today, it's like if you say something people don't like, it's everybody leaning in on you to
Hmm.
quote unquote cancel you. So how do you deal with that type of environment, especially presiding over so many unique IPs?
Well, as a magazine, and we still get letters and feedback. We're always open to discussion, debate. And when Larry was alive, he used to go around the country and speaking at law schools and on the First Amendment. And he was even invited and spoke at Oxford and Cambridge. And in England, they don't have the First Amendment. So he was very humbled by the experience to speak at, especially at Oxford, when he went before people like Winston Churchill, Kennedy. I mean, it is a very humbling experience to walk into that hall and speak among the elite students. But here in the United States, he didn't receive an honorarium, but he was very passionate about the First Amendment and wanted to be remembered on expanding the parameters of free speech. But he always used to say that it's all speech. You just can't say, well, what about this? What about that? It's just our founding fathers, when they drafted the Constitution, they said all speech is protected speech.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. And I mean, listen, we are all individual people and we all have our own belief systems and, where we were raised and how we grew up and what we experienced in life. And, it's interesting in the book, like Larry's upbringing, like where he came from and what he accomplished. That was in him. That was in that man as a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
And this was his journey and destiny. This is what the universe had in mind for him. And I know that like Hustler has often pushed these boundaries in terms of what's socially acceptable, in terms of like sexuality and political commentary. And so, Liz, with that being said, like how have the views on what Hustler should provoke or challenge, how has that evolved over time? And what is that looking like now?
Well, with society and norms that have changed, Hustler Magazine still pushes the boundaries. We're always challenging politicians. The elected officials we hold them accountable. If you're going to say something, you're responsible for that. Their constituents put you there. You have to account for that. And so we follow, that's the one thing I do is follow the news on both sides. I watch both sides because Larry used to say, because I used to ask him, why do you watch so much Fox? Why? He says, Liz, I have to know what the other side is saying. He goes, but you'll learn one or two things at the same time. But you've got to have balance. You've got to know what both sides are saying. Might not agree, but you always have to know what both sides are saying. So if you're in a debate or discussion, you can answer and really defend or know what they're speaking about.
I'm in full agreement with that. Otherwise you lean towards becoming a cyborg, right? If you are so
Right.
inside of one thing only, you are disrespecting cultures, like you mentioned before. You're disrespecting gender
Mm-hmm.
rights, body. It's not my job to decide what you do with your body. There are so many topics and ideas that we could come up with where, whatever you say you stand for, you got to take the heat for it one way or another, but you should hear both sides so that your opinion at least sounds educated.
Exactly. Larry was born in Eastern Kentucky. He was very poor, and he always said that, he didn't want to stay there for long, and he did run away. And in his autobiography, he wrote that when he left at age 15, he was molested by the sheriff, and he was trying to hitchhike out of Salyersville, Kentucky. But Larry was a real trailblazer. I mean, he served his country. He was in the Army, Navy. He was on the USS Enterprise. he always felt that he was a little bit illiterate. He didn't get to graduate from high school, so he did get his GEE and GED, and then he joined Book of the Month so he could improve on his reading skills. And then he even signed up for, I'm sure you might have heard, in the 60s, Evelyn Wood. It's kind of like speed reading. And I asked him, Larry, show me how it goes. And he said, you read right down the middle. And if you don't understand that page, you go back and read it again. But that was the point of how to speed read, was read right down the middle. And then when he was on the Enterprise, he met President Kennedy, came on the carrier. It was actually one of the first nuclear carriers ever, when they started, making these big carriers. And then after that, when he left, then he went back to Ohio where his mother lived because his parents were divorced. And he went to Dayton, Ohio, and then he went into the bar business. His mother gave him a bar. She had 2 bars. And I think one was Whatever's Right and Hillbilly Haven. But then he started expanding his nightclubs, and then he named them Hustler. And how he got the name Hustler, at one of his bars, he said there was this hooker there, and he said, I'm trying to come up with a newsletter for my clubs. And she said, you should name that newsletter after my moneymaker called Hustler. And he said, I love it. Because he said, whenever you're naming something, even a bar or a nightclub, it should be real catchy and it should try to be one word. He said, it's a marketing thing. And he said, that's what I'm going to name my newsletter, is Hustler. And then, so he named his nightclubs Hustler, the newsletter. He had 6. He was in Akron, Dayton, Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati. And then before you know it, the newsletter started like just a few pages until it grew up to 32. And he says, I want to start a magazine. So he started the magazine, shut all the clubs down because he needed money, capital. And so he didn't make his first million until the Jackie O issue. That was a year later. So the first issue was July 1974. So it was July 1975 that he published pictures of Jackie O on the island of Mykonos. And it went to print 3 times, and that's when he made his first million. So it's just a story, a very interesting story.
We'll be right back after these messages.
I Love Wine and Dogs is now streaming for millions of fans on YouTube.
Welcome back to the show.
And all this history, and again, this was just in this man's brain. Like, this was not, he did not go study marketing. Like,
No.
It just was in him. And that is what I love. He was a self-made man. And Tim and I talk about this. Like, yes, education is great, but there are just some people that are not cut out to be in school to do the typical degrees. They've got this talent. And, I look at him, I admire him so much for what he did. I mean, it's incredible on so many different levels. But I want to ask Liz, what have been some of the biggest challenges in preserving Larry's legacy, but while also putting your own stamp on Hustler?
Well, first of all, a woman. So, you know what Larry used to tell me all the time, and he used to tell his executives, he said, I like putting women in management positions because throughout the years experience, he said, he would say women are smarter than men. We have women in a lot of the top management areas of the company. But along the line, through the years, Larry always felt that it was also important for him to give back, because he says, once you find yourself in a position and you have the extra resources, you need to start giving back for those that are less fortunate. So we have a couple of charities in Eastern Kentucky where he grew up that I still continue to support. And we belong to 3 nonprofits here in Southern California. One is called the ACLU. They're in the courts every day defending our rights. The second one is Public Counsel. They're giving legal representation to those that don't have the resources. The third one is Death Penalty Focus. Mike Farrell was one of Larry's dearest friends. And Larry helped him with his nonprofit. And what it stands for, it helps provide legal resources and also trying to get people off of death row and out of prison that are being wrongfully accused of a crime. And so they've been very successful, but they need the resources. And Larry always felt that government should not be in the business of killing people. Now, remember, Larry was shot by a white supremacist. But he wasn't bitter because Larry used to say, they might have taken my legs, but they didn't take this. And he says, there's nothing I can do about it, but I have to continue moving forward and I'm going to live. I used to think, Larry, like, how do people do that? You know, it's hard. He spent more time in a wheelchair as an adult than he wasn't born that way. He was only like 35 when he was shot, and he died when he was passed away at 78. But I used to think that, wow, Larry is he's a real trailblazer, and he was just, you know, a hero and somebody who always continued to live. He used to tell me, he goes, people forget to live, Liz. People have to live their lives. You can't worry about the small stuff and give back. What's wrong with giving back? You know, you have to help those because he knows what it's like to be poor growing up.
And it's almost by design, right? In a lot of cases, that they keep you in a position where you can't afford to defend yourself properly, so that they can keep this cycle going. I don't think a lot of people recognize the fact that, behind all of these prisons is somebody making money off of the people who are put into the prisons, right? You are a commodity. And
Right.
so having someone like you, someone like Larry, someone, an entity like the Hustler Enterprises supporting those different nonprofits is so appreciated, because you give people an opportunity to share their story. Everybody's got their own
Absolutely.
story.
When Larry would meet some of these men that would get out of prison that were freed, when Larry would shake their hand, one time I looked at Larry and he had a tear in his eye, and I said, Larry, you look so like you're emotional. And he said, Liz, I know what it's like to be on the other side. I have been in prison. I have been jailed. The only thing different about Larry is he was never a convicted felon. He was jailed many times for free expression, free speech, protest, the whole thing. But, you know, when he was jailed in Butner, North Carolina, he was paralyzed. And I said, what was the most difficult part of being in jail as a paraplegic? He said, you know what, Liz? It was very hard being there because I wasn't able to walk and do for myself. But what was really, it was just humbling, is that he said a lot of the prisoners would come and say, hey, Mr. Flint, I'll help you. Or sometimes when he would go to eat a meal, he said people would be clapping for him because he was there for something. He was jailed for not giving up his source, because he had the DeLorean tapes, and he would not tell the judge where he got that tape. You know, Larry wasn't a snitch. He was a man of his word. And so that's why he was jailed. Plus throwing an orange at a judge. Who does that? And lawyers would tell Larry, you did everything that we would love to do, but we get disbarred.
You were a registered nurse, and then you came to Hustler. You had all these different types of roles as you were learning about the company and all these different
Yeah.
faces and different ways, and ultimately, obviously, becoming the chairwoman. What aspects of your earlier life inform your leadership style?
Well, I'll kind of give you a little history. So, you know, as a registered nurse and working in the coronary care unit, and as my training, you have to be a self-starter. You have to be a leader in your own right, a very good listener, and you play many roles. And also, you have to be able to know how to work with other people. And so that training, working in the ICU, and in moments of making critical decisions and reaching out to your other nurses that you work with and residents and fellows and other doctors and pharmacists. You have to be able to, it's like critical thinking. And some of those skills, you take them anywhere and apply them, and they come into play. So when Larry asked me, see, I didn't work for a year after I met him. And so I resigned in 93 from UCLA because I had met him in 91 and I started to date. But then I still wanted to work at UCLA, and I went from full-time, part-time, per diem, 1 day a month. And then my boss asked me one morning, she called me in her office and she said, Liz, where is your loyalty? Is it UCLA or Larry Flint? Oh my God, I've never been confronted with anything like that. So then the next day I told Larry, and she said, what? And I said, yeah, I started to cry. I felt like why would anybody ask somebody that loyalty? And he said, oh, you don't need to work anymore. I'll take care of you. So I resigned, and I didn't work for a year. And then in 94, he told me, you're going to work. And I said, oh, okay. I thought I was going back to UCLA. I said, okay. And he said, no, you're coming to work at the company. And I said, oh, no, I don't know anything about publishing. I don't know that work. He goes, no. You're going to work, and I'm going to start you in a position, and I will mentor you. So, yeah. But I wore many hats and learned many different areas of the company. And now I know how to put a magazine together. And not easy, but I still edit with our editor, the magazine. She comes every Wednesday, and we do edits every Wednesday. That's my time with Ann Denbach. Keep in mind, the editor of Housekeeping magazine is a woman, and she's been working with us since 1986. You couldn't ask for a more loyal employee. Her name is Ann Denbach.
We'll be right back after these messages. I Love Wine and Dogs podcast has brand new merchandise. Have you ever looked at something and realized you didn't need it until you saw it? ilovewineanddogs.shop, your one-stop shop to support loving pets, good wine, and great people doing awesome things in their communities. Visit ilovewineanddogs.shop and get that new merch. Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back to the show, everybody, with our guest, Liz Flynt. Wow. Such amazing stuff, such good stuff. So when I was looking through the book, it really does show and reflect women of all different body shapes, different colors, identities. And I love that. To me, those are real women. And how did Larry, what was his thought on that? I know some other magazines, everybody's a supermodel, but it's just very real women showing their gorgeous bodies, no matter what size, how old, all of that. Share that with us.
Well, Hustler magazine and Larry were always on the cutting edge. And like I said, they always were, the first to shock people on different things. But really, what Larry felt that he wanted to photograph the women that was either next door or that you would meet in the market or at a club. But Larry believed in, if you look at from the 70s, diversity, inclusion. He was one of the first to put transgender. Larry was shot for an interracial photo spread. It breaks my heart. But you know what? But in terms of women, Larry believed that all women were beautiful. That's who we are. We're all different shapes and sizes. And some people like Gloria Steinem would say, all he does is objectify women. Not really, because every woman that wants to be photographed with Hustler, they sign a model release. They read the terms and they sign on their own free will. But Hustler was always trying to make it the realistic, whereas Penthouse had that glossy, glazy lens, and Vaseline kind of look, and then on the lens, and then Playboy was the Barbie doll, the cute blonde or the cute brunette in the cute little polka dot bikini or whatever, or bunny ears, that cute little waist, 25-inch waist. And that's not the woman out there that you would see walking the streets, at the mall. So Larry always felt that, he wanted to be able to share that with his subscribers and his readers.
And so when Tim said Larry was really, and I think you did too, he was really ahead of his time, because now we look at commercials where Dove is showing women of all different sizes, and commercials, it's not this skinny one look or one type. And so he was doing this before anybody thought about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, he was a real pioneer. I mean, sometimes people would tell him, "Oh, I can't believe you did that." But Larry said, "I'm going to be me. I'm not going to be controlled. I'm the publisher. I have to be able to put out things that sometimes people didn't, but actually people did like that." And that's why his subscriber and readership grew.
Now, under your leadership,
Mm-hmm.
how do you, the way that you're defining how Larry was kind of adapting with the times as they were, back in the day, how are you, like, what's next, right? Like, how are you adapting the company and the different IPs that you guys own for not only now, but for what's coming?
Yeah. So obviously in publishing, I can't begin to tell you, social media, Instagram, TikTok, all our entities like gaming, retail, that's what you do. Everything is on social media. So you have to be careful and almost a little scripted, because you have to be careful. And there are guidelines with Instagram and TikTok, especially with adult. You can't do this. You can't show this. You have to do this. You can't say this. Yeah, there are some, guidelines that we have to follow strict, or they will ban you or take you off. But the one thing I'm very proud of in the retail, with our 100 retail stores, is, and I launched it in February, a week before Valentine's, is that Hustler Hollywood partnered with DoorDash. So if you go on the hustlerhollywood.com site and you pick wherever, your city you're in, and you select, like, I want to buy this novelty, I want to buy these little handcuffs, I want to buy this particular flavored whatever, and then you pay and do the DoorDash, fill out the little thingy, and then within 50 minutes you will have it at your doorstep.
That is brilliant.
And we're the first. Nobody else has done.
Wow.
So once again, Hustler on the cutting edge, pioneering, doing something that nobody else has done. When I tell some of my friends or competitors are like, "How did you do it?" I said, I don't give the recipe out or the strategy. Can't. With our casinos, we're always doing something different. Next Thursday, I will be at Larry Flint's Lucky Lady, and I will promote one of the tournaments and kick it off with Beat the Boss. So Beat the Boss is a tournament that I have a bounty on me, and someone's going to try and beat me at Hold'em.
Fun
I
stuff.
mean, that parking lot is full. Everybody shows up, and they come in, they say, "We want to beat you, Mrs. Flint." And I said, so last year when I played the tournament, I was there for like 2.5 hours, and this gentleman next to me said, "Mrs. Flint, you need to be giving your money away. You can't be beating people." And I said, "Oh my God, that's right. I'm not there to play. I'm there to let them beat me." So then I started playing real reckless and giving my chips away.
That's great. I love it. Got to keep it fun and do things like that. And I love that you are so personable with people. When I met you, I just immediately felt connected and so comfortable. Like we had been friends for a while, and that's not an easy quality to have. That's who your heart is and who you are.
Thank you, Heidi. Well, I'm an Aquarian, and we love people. And so that's who I am.
Liz, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to share with our listeners? Anything about anything at all?
Well, I did want to say, which is near and dear to my heart, that I asked Woody Harrelson, who played Larry in the People versus Larry Flint. He wrote the foreword to the book, and I'm just so thankful to him and his wife. After the movie, they became such dear friends of Larry and I. And at the end of the foreword, he wrote, "I'm glad Larry chose Liz to run the company, and long may she sail." And it just made me cry when I read it, you know.
Liz, thank you so much for being
You're
on our
welcome.
show. I can't tell you, this was such a privilege and an honor. And I'm excited for people to see this and just get to understand how amazing Larry was, and that the legacy continues with you. Everybody, please remember, adopt, don't shop. And you can find us and follow us on all of our social media. I Love Wine and Dogs, our YouTube channel, and you can get our merch. So on that note, everybody, make it a great day. Take care. Until next time.